Welcome, everyone, to our next session, Rethinking Work. As always, we are going to give people a few minutes to dial in, connect. Hopefully, everyone is dedicating a little bit of time for deep thinking, learning new information, new skills, and also, again, meeting each other in this virtual room. Just as a reminder, as the webinar is going to progress, first, we are recording it and it will be posted on our YouTube channel. You can always go back and review. Secondly, for the Q&A, this is intended to be an interactive session. We are going to run it in the fireside chat format, but we are hoping to get really good questions from all of you in the Q&A section on your screen. You can see down a Q&A with a question mark icon. So that's where you go and put your questions in. This is what really makes these sessions so exciting and the best learning experience. Yes, Lori, thank you. What we do here, I'm Anna Tavis, your host here, chair of the Department of Human Capital Management at NYU. And we host these Rethinking Work series with the thought leaders from different walks of the broad workplace universe. And today I am excited to welcome Serena Huang, who is our guest and speaker, and she's the author of the recent book, The Inclusion Equation. She's also the founder of Data with Serena, her own consulting business. And I'll tell you a little bit more about Serena in a minute. Here she is. Hello, dialing in from Chicago today. But as people are dialing in here, following Lori's introduction, who's calling from New Jersey, please, in the chat, just tell us where you are calling from so that we have a sense of the broader community. Thank you. Yes, Jonathan, the recording, as I mentioned in the beginning, is going to be available to you. You're going to receive a follow-up email, as well as it will be posted in on our YouTube channel. You will get a link to it. And if you are not connected to Serena on LinkedIn, I recommend you do, because she is a very active and very skilled influencer in the space of human capital analytics applications. And let me just share with you a couple of data points about her background, because I think it's really relevant to what we are here to do, to explore the whole evolving field of using data analytics evidence to support the claims, to support the policies, to support the initiatives that we run in our organizations. So before she started her own through Data with Serena consultancy that helps companies worldwide reimagine work, where well-being, inclusion, and profits and successful business growth coexist. Serena was actually embedded in some of the signature big brand name organizations in senior executive roles. She was with GE, Kraft, Heinz, and with PayPal in her previous career. And that's how I actually met Serena, when she was still in and an insider to those organizations. And then she made that pivot, and then most recently published the book that we're here to discuss. And I want to start out by asking Serena a question of how she got to pick this particular topic and evolve this idea for your first book, I think, right? Thank you, but not last, not last.
Exactly. Thank you so much for having me. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone who's on. Thank you so much, especially for those in APAC, for staying up so late to join this session today. Feel very special to be here. Gosh, I asked myself what topic would be appropriate for my first book because I love writing. So this is slightly embarrassing, but since you are here, I'll share. I started writing 3 books at once, actually. So, because I could not decide. So I had like a book on people analytics and a book on, inclusion and of course data as part of it, and then well-being separately. And because I couldn't decide, they were also important to me, and I have a ton to say. And ultimately, I realized that I needed to focus. So I started to do more research on the 2 applications within people analytics, one around inclusion, another around employee well-being. And I noticed that there's a ton of books, research on individual topics, but nothing that really connects the two. And I remember thinking back to all the big surveys I ran in corporate, there's a strong connection between inclusion and well-being. I remember every survey we would do where we would have a question around, whether or not you feel included. Obviously, we don't ask it like that, but there's different measures of inclusion. And I noticed that teams that reported higher levels of inclusion also reported higher levels of well-being on all fronts, whether it's emotional, social, and other aspects. So I thought, maybe I'm onto something here. So I took the plunge and decided to focus really on both as well as the connection. And I know that from experience, data and AI can connect those dots. And I started interviewing people on, does anyone actually work with each other? Because sometimes in my past experience as head of people analytics, I would get requests from the head of well-being, right, the head of DEI asking for analytics help. And I would notice that they operate in their silos. They don't often talk to each other as much as I think they might want to. So employees get lots of initiatives thrown their way, right? You have the DEI pillars, attract, retain, promote, right? And then you have well-being, that's like social well-being, financial well-being, emotional well-being, and so on. And so you got initiatives all over the place, but there isn't something connecting them. So in my research, I actually found several top organizations do connect those dots, and they use data slash people analytics as the thread connecting those. So I definitely took a risk. There was a good chance that that the connection didn't really exist beyond my silos and my organizations that I have seen. But I'm glad that I was able to find supporting evidence and individuals leading organizations doing this practice.
Thank you so much, Serena. And just the elephant in the room here, we're already getting questions that we expected. How is this 180 turn on specifically DEI and the language of DEI has impacted, organizations, and how you see this a line of work evolving. And I suspect there's some element of a solution that your book actually has to offer, and your entire work and consulting work has to offer. So here it is,
Okay, yes, we're starting with the hard ones, right?
yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And I think almost daily now I'm getting requests from journalists to comment on this very spicy topic. And it's kind of all over the place. I think for the first couple months since January, we were in shock. Everyone was in shock with the executive orders and what does that mean? And then we started to see kind of two sides of the spectrum where companies say, actually, we're doubling down, right? The Costco's of the world who said, nope, we're going to keep focusing on DEI, Apple, for example. And then on the other extreme, we have large companies coming out and say, well, actually, as a federal contractor, we can't really do this anymore. So we are going to have to scale back. It's not really our choice, but we have to be compliant, and that's why we're doing this. And getting lots of backlash as expected. And I definitely see the language soften around DEI on different websites that I've checked up, different job postings that used to say, we encourage people of all backgrounds apply, and we don't see that as much anymore. So the changes are definitely happening. And I think at the same time, I wonder what impact that it has longer term on talent attraction. Obviously, we're in a very tough job market right now, so the impact may not show up until a little bit later. But we know from research that Gen Z, millennials, right, our next generation employees are very focused on inclusion, well-being, and they actually in many surveys say we are going to be willing to leave if my employer doesn't care about things that I care about, and that is inclusion and well-being. Whether or not that means they actually can get a job that they love and leave is of course a different story in this tough market, but I think that definitely impacts intent to stay, and it changes the dynamics as far as who is your competitor now, not just the compensation you offer, but also your stance on topics like DEI could matter in talent attraction and retention longer term. And and I think in certain fields like AI, for example, if the company is really focused on AI, we know for a long time in tech, there just isn't as many women. For example, we know, and you all know this really well in higher ed, you can see the STEM pipeline, right? It's not 50-50 for women and men. It's not 50-50 for people of color. And what does that mean for AI? Now, it's even smaller as far as the talent pool. So I think companies that want to expand and grow with AI may eventually hit a wall with we need diverse talent pool because we can't we just don't have enough, and we can't innovate without the same efforts as before. But I think it will take a little while. Again, I don't have the crystal ball, but that's my guess based on what we're starting to see a little bit in the market.
Excellent. And we have actually a question here about how do you strike the balance and what your advice to companies would be. And that's where I see the opportunity for consultants like yourselves, like yourself, to actually help companies navigate that very sometimes, uncertain and fast changing environment. However, I think in the HR community, and especially in the people analytics community, and that's where I think your book really fits in and is a huge, benefit and a contribution to our field, is that we've always known that unless you put hard metrics, unless you put data to prove your business case,
Yeah.
then it just becomes ideology, language, politics, etc. You go with the opinion that is mine. Whereas I think what you were able to present is a very hardcore data evidence that this particular approach pays off. Could you comment on that particular trend that was kind of emerging in the whole conversation around inclusion in the workplace, around the importance of hard data, the importance of measuring?
Yes,
Um,
absolutely. In tough times and uncertain times, the initiatives that get cut first are the ones where they can demonstrate a clear ROI. Doesn't matter if it's HR, doesn't matter if it's well-being or inclusion. If you can demonstrate that it's made a business impact, it's going to be gone. And I think that's even more critical now with the backlash on DEI and really uncertainty being even more prevalent in the market. CFOs are asking, why should I give you more money to continue this? And it's not just DEI and well-being, it's everything else. It's leadership development, it's all the L&D programs that may or may not be on the chopping block. So measuring is so critical. And I argue that everything can be measured if you want to, even things that seem fluffy, like inclusion, even things that seem like emotional well-being, it can be measured. And when we put in programs in the company, there must be an intention behind it, right? What metric are we trying to improve? I remember in COVID times, a lot of companies rolled out free yoga, right? Meditation apps. Let's just give people free therapy as well on top of that. Well, great. Is it making an impact? A lot of companies did roll back those efforts because they couldn't prove that it made a difference. Because they were, first of all, when we check the usage in certain companies, I've seen the usage is actually really low, right? If you have only 5% of people log into your seven-figure meditation app, that's a pretty bad ROI. So beyond that, right, let's say people even use it. Does it actually make them feel better? Is it a result of your app, or is it actually a result of something else? So that's where the scientific approach is really important. And I draw the parallel to now CEOs are starting to ask the tough questions of we've invested money in AI. Is it paying off? Right. And the same thing where I would say to executives, you can't call me and ask me to quantify the ROI after you've already rolled it out, right? We need to figure out a baseline of pre-program, what is the health and well-being of your employees, if it's a well-being effort, if it's, hiring, do you know how you were hiring before? And afterwards, is there a difference in that particular KPI? So I think there's a lot of issues with companies not even measuring or not putting enough intention behind the programs. And it's sort of, we need to do something, let's do something now. And if you design a program that is great, but doesn't actually move the needle on your metric, at the end of the day, you're going to lose funding next year because you won't be able to show an impact. So I think again, there's just a lot of eyes on all HR programs right now, and measuring the effectiveness, again, with a good approach, scientific approach since day one is so critical.
Yeah. And the word of the day seems to be efficiency, right? And I really like how you kind of emphasize effectiveness rather than efficiency, because, again, for the efficiency to make sense, make economic sense, it needs to be measured and see what actually delivers results, right? And I think that in some of those efficiency for efficiency's sake,
Yeah.
those are the questions. And here I am. What I really appreciated about your book, Serena, is that you were very specific, kind of providing not only the evidence and making the case, but also sort of the guidelines and the playbook for companies to go about governing and measuring and, taking specific steps in setting up those programs. Could you give us a little bit for the people who have not yet read your book, give us an insight as to how you arrive at the recommendations that you're making in the book?
Yeah, of course. So for a lot of the program effectiveness measurement, I would call it broadly, I think that's a skill set sometimes isn't emphasized enough for HR business partners, for people who may not have loved numbers, right, coming into the profession. But it makes such a difference in terms of being able to make a business impact. And I just, I break it down to kind of simple steps. First, you have to figure out what metric you're expecting this program to impact. And it can be one training, it could be a whole year of investment in a new technology, whatever it is. But are you trying to improve retention, You're trying to improve the hiring of what, be very specific on the metric. And then you figure out what your baseline measure is before the implementation of, again, whether it's a tech or training or a program. And then ask yourself this part is a little bit tough. How long does it take? How long do I think it really takes realistically to move the needle on this metric? If you are a 50,000 people company, even moving 1% on diversity is going to take a long time. You can do the math, right? You can do the math of how many people you need to hire. Do you even have the budget to hire that many people? And let's assume that nobody quits, right? So moving 1% will take X number of months or even years. So ask yourself how long it really takes to move the needle, and whether or not that's realistic. And then after that amount of time, measure again, do you see a difference? And then as a bonus, make sure that you're isolating all the other activities, programs, environmental factors that could have impacted that. For example, during the Great Resignation, everyone was quitting. It doesn't matter what you do. There's very little you can do. In times like this, most people are staying. So it's tough to always isolate, especially in human capital. But it is possible to get a little bit cleaner so that you are able to articulate the impact of your program, and it's not because of something else.
Yeah, yeah, this is an excellent point. And as an educator myself, I am thinking that, when people, major in inclusion or diversity or talent, it's not common to have them also learn data science,
Right.
etc. And I think that it needs to be introduced as a requirement. That's what we do at NYU. Our students need to be data literate and be able to tell their story with data, not just with nice
Yes.
to have anecdotes. In your book, what's really compelling was the work that you've done interviewing leading companies and leading practitioners in that space. And you talked to Meta, you talked to Cisco, I think, you talked to a whole range, Dell, LinkedIn, HP, Visa, PayPal,
Yeah.
like a whole variety of different companies. Could you, as an illustration, share with us some of the best practices that you've seen and some of the creative and analytical approaches to these issues in organizations?
Yeah, of course. I think I'll share a couple great examples that I love. One is a company that was able to connect the dots between well-being and DEI. Again, typically those HR functions don't work as closely together. But we know that health insurance costs a lot of money for the company. And when employees are not healthy, it costs them a ton. So every company probably has great incentives to reduce healthcare spend one way or another. And this giant company figured out that, hey, we have a gap in people taking up preventative care. In particular, the Black and Hispanic communities don't seem to take up preventive care, and it's covered by our insurance. If more of them were to do that, it will eventually save us a lot of money. But how do we get to those communities? So the head of well-being and the head of DEI got together, and they eventually work with specific ERGs, targeting those messages for the Hispanic and Black communities, again, through the ERG communication channels to encourage them to take up preventive care. And they were able to see a huge impact and increase in taking up preventive care in these communities. And it wasn't that they didn't see the message before, they didn't see the emails. It's just that the communication did not resonate with them. It was not spoken in a language in a way that really motivated them to change. So by partnering with the ERGs for this specific purpose, they were able to quickly make an impact. And this cost them, guess what? $0. So it was a few meetings and drafted emails and just communicating in a different way. So again, that's real dollars saved in the end, and I think it's really special to see those teams working together and using ERGs in a really different way to promote the health and well-being of employees in different communities.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think
yeah,
I actually, this is something, Serena, I loved about your book, making a connection between inclusivity and well-being is such an important link that immediately not only connects to the bottom line, but it affects every aspect of the talent strategy and
right.
talent approach. Um, to kind of drill down a little bit further on the well-being front, I know that you spent some time talking about specifically mental health, and we know what happened after the pandemic. We really have the kind of mental health epidemic crisis in at least all Western
Yeah,
economies.
yeah.
And in your research, in your conversations with companies, how do you find that particular aspect of inclusivity? And there's also the other side of it is neurodiversity that is coming up as a huge topic. So could you share with us a little bit what you found out, what were surprises for you, and what is the kind of the guiding light for us to look forward to the solutions?
Yeah, I think that's definitely the silver lining with pandemic is it's more okay than before to talk about mental health at work, because we were able to see that some people are struggling. We see them daily on Zoom and some are not doing well. And people started to talk about it, sometimes on social media, sometimes in one-on-one conversations. So I think there's a definitely an uptick in companies paying attention to mental health because they realize, well, it's part of who we are. And if people are not well, whether it's physically or emotionally, then they cannot perform. It's as simple as that. So I think that's coming out of COVID. A lot of companies started to put in place more EAP sessions, more free therapy included, and different apps and telehealth and all those, more accessible to more people. But then I think it's also continue past pandemic. Right? I definitely see the trend again, partially perhaps because millennials and Gen Z are much more openly talking about it. And in fact, I saw a tip on how do you assess whether or not a company is really supportive of mental health is you ask them in the interview process. This is bold, I agree. So keep that in mind. Ask them, are they okay with you taking an afternoon off once a week for your therapy and make up for it afterwards, because that's important to your mental health and see what the reactions are. So again, not every company, not every hiring manager will be open to this, but it does shift the conversation, and we're starting to see that. I remember having to advocate for measuring mental health years ago. And then fast forward just, I think in the middle of the pandemic, the leadership team asked me, can you please help us measure mental health in more real time, in more scientific ways, so we know where to help, how to help, and who is struggling. So much so that we started building out things in the workflows on detecting certain keywords, detecting the sentiment of employees based on their comments in public channels as well as in surveys that a particular group might need additional support, and then contact the HR groups and the legal groups as needed. So again, it's not rocket science, but it takes a level of care and empathy to advocate for this and to implement something. And as far as what to do going forward, I'm a strong advocate for keep talking about it, right? That reduces the stigma, especially when a leader does it, especially when a C-level leader says, and again, like there's a difference between my daughter my daughter suffers from depression and I have experience versus I have had personal experience with mental health condition and this is how I coped. Very different situation. I think we started to see in the pandemic and even before that some leaders are openly talking about their family struggling with mental health conditions, but saying that you have personal experience and how you cope with it is very different. And then to continue to measure and figure out, and really before that, figure out why you want to measure it. Some, don't, my only one rule for survey is if it doesn't change the decisions you are going to make, don't ask that question. So, for example, if you're not going to provide more commute benefits, don't ask about people's opinions and how they feel about their commute, right? That's going to frustrate your employees. So, so if there's a clear purpose on why you're asking about mental health, because there is effort, there is time, resources that you will put it behind supporting their mental health, then do ask it. So I think keep measuring and then act really timely. Some of these things doesn't really require a ton of budget, but it requires, like I said, empathy and care. Maybe it's a conversation as simple as that. When you start to see comments in the surveys around loneliness, for example, how do you create more social connection for employees? Is there something that you want to address? So I think it's a topic that will continue to be really important. And especially now with the uncertainty, with burnout continuing to be an issue for a lot of companies and tighter resources, uncertainty around AI impacting our jobs, all of that causes anxiety for everyone. So acknowledge it, measure it, and actually use the data to make a difference and make their lives better.
Yeah, a really, really important point. And this is where we are kind of backing into a bigger conversation about trust. Because, one of the challenges of approaching these types of issues is whether employees feel, safe to
Mhm.
disclose some of those conditions. And I think we are, by kind of creating a lot of uncertainty as to how those issues will resonate with your organization, there are more and more issues that are being pulled back into the closet, right? So how can an organization, and what you've seen from your experience in the interviews, you've seen what companies do to ensure that there is a level of trust and safety in, for you even to be, able to access those data, the information about employees at such a
Yeah.
personal level.
Right. Yes, it takes a lot of trust building upfront and transparency. I think transparency and openness goes a long way on how is that data going to be used? Who exactly will see it? Because everyone has the question of, is my manager going to see my response? Right? And you need to have very clear answers on or hopefully the answer is no, right? And then if not, then who sees it? Right? If there's something really sensitive, does the legal team get alerted immediately? And then I get a call. And if someone needs help, is it anonymized, right? So there's kind of the balance of privacy, but then also you need to be able to help people. If it's completely anonymized, then you can actually figure out who needs help. So my advice is general, don't ask directly about mental health conditions, right? Obviously, there's data privacy and that's health information. You need a whole different way of storing that information. But ask around, whether or not they feel supported by their manager, how their energy level is. For example, those are different ways that you can ask and still gather data. If it's truly a mental health concern, I generally recommend a one-on-one conversation, right? And really encouraging people to come to you as a leader or as HR professional if they are not sure what to do, to seek help. And then just for leaders to do check-ins so that it doesn't feel on a regular basis. So it doesn't seem like, oh, only when you look sad that I'm checking in. Right? I care about you as a person, and therefore I'm asking how are things going in your life. So that creates a trust around, I care about you beyond just your work and beyond just when you are really, really struggling. But before that, I want to have a conversation. So that definitely helps. But I think the data privacy has to be very clear. A lot of times companies will outsource that work to a vendor and they don't have a clear idea on who actually has access. And so I think definitely get clarity on that and make sure you're comfortable as a company with what you signed up for. Um, and another option sometimes I've seen companies do is hire third-party vendors to come to a smaller focus group conversations around sensitive topics. Let's say you have a leader who, you're starting to hear rumors this leader is micromanaging or is, maybe even toxic, and you're concerned about the impact on employees' retention and well-being, but you can't directly ask people because no one will speak up in that way. So perhaps hire an external vendor to come in and have that closed door conversation where they will summarize the findings without naming anyone in the group, and then share that back. Again, lots of options in gathering data today. It doesn't have to be surveys. It can definitely be very creative, but most importantly, I advocate for transparency and openness around how the data will be used and who gets to see it.
Yeah, very, very helpful, especially as we see this companies, organizations needing to take more and more responsibilities that were considered to be outside of the kind of domain of managing people in
Yes.
organizations. They were kind of in the private space, but because of the cost, because of the healthcare, because of the erosion of support systems outside of work, companies need to step in and provide those types of services. And I have two more questions that I think will kind of flow out of this particular angle of looking at them on focus. And that is one, companies have always, or organizations have always considered productivity as one of the goals and measurements. And I know that in your book, you pick up that topic as not that straightforward black and white. There's a lot that's packed into this concept of productivity. Can you unpack it for us and explain how you approach it and how we need to consider productivity in the light of everything we've discussed before?
Yeah. If I only have $1 for every time someone asks me to help them measure productivity, right? Especially since COVID, we've been wondering how do we measure this since the lockdown. And mathematically, economically, business-wise, there's a very straightforward measure that is kind of considered standard, which is revenue per employee, right? That's the easiest way that you can measure kind of productivity across all companies in the same way, revenue per employee. But then even then it gets complicated, right? What do you mean by employee? Is it FTEs? How do you calculate the part-time people? What about contractors, right? What about temporary workers? Who is included? And what about people who are out on sick? Do you exclude those days? Is it per day? Is it per person? And what about fractional? I mean, it gets very complicated. So even the simple measure is not that simple. So as we dig deeper, I generally find that there isn't one metric that works for every function, even every job. How you measure productivity of an IT employee versus an HR employee is different, right? So I think we can think about things like workload. sometimes as a close adjacent measure to productivity, like how many tickets does a person close in IT, right? How many calls does a call center person take, right? That's all quantifiable. Lines of code an engineer might have written a day. And but then when it comes to other functions like HR, finance, it becomes really hard to measure, right? We know finance gets busy at quarter end, but does that mean they're not productive the rest of the time? No, they're just busier at certain times. And the same with HR individuals who are busy around compensation planning time. That doesn't mean they're not busy putting out fires the rest of the year. So generally, I think the kind of a better way to measure productivity is based on what jobs need to be done and tying that back to the business goals. If your goal is to sell engines, for example, right? How, who is included in the whole process in selling engines? There's certainly the customer facing people, but then there's also the support function that makes sure that the customer facing person is able to deliver. So you have to include all of that. And then another way to think about it is we're not able to see hours from, let's say, hours you are logged on to your laptop, right? Hours you are spending in your emails and meetings and so on. And all else equal, is a person spending less time getting the same outcomes, more productive, as their peer in the same job title, for example? Maybe. Maybe they're using AI better and that makes them productive. So there's a lot of measurement challenges when it comes to productivity. And and of course you can ask people, how do you feel productive, right? As a measurement tool. And once you have enough data points over time, let's say I ask you every single day on the scale 1 to 10 or 1 to 5, how productive you feel today. Over time, I can sort of tell when you feel more productive, when you feel less productive, and figure out why. So again, those are all options. And I, again, going back to ask the question to the company, why do you want to measure this? What are you going to do with this information? Sometimes I ask a provocative question to the leadership team who's asking us to measure something that is really difficult. Okay, let's fast forward 2 months from now. You have the perfect data on measuring this productivity metric that you've been dreaming of measuring for every single person in the company. What are you going to do now? So sometimes they pause and they're like, wait, I thought it's going to take you 2 years to measure this. So I haven't thought that far. And other times they might have very clear answers to, well, now we're going to implement new processes for those that are less productive. We're going to, give them more AI training if they seem to be below the median or the average compared to their peers. So depending on what you are going to do with the metric, that should drive how you want to think about the measurement. Because you can easily be in a rabbit hole and spend the next 6 months, 12 months still without perfect measurement of this particular metric.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I could go on, but I will
Yes, no,
stop
it's
myself.
I think we get it. And on top of everything, all the complexity that you just described, how will AI change the field? It's beginning to happen, but still early stages. But since this is the conversation of the day, AI changing everything, how do you see this particular, if you were, to write your book 2 years from now, what changes do you want to see that are coming with these new technologies?
I hope it's adopted in every organization, and that as a result, our well-being actually improves. That might sound very grandiose, but I truly believe that is one possible future, where we are using AI to help us quantify. Previously, difficult to quantify measures like well-being, productivity, inclusion, and then using it to help us do things that we don't like doing, that AI is better doing. I always encourage people to think about how you can collaborate with AI and not compete with AI. So things that you are good at doing, that AI isn't as good at doing, double down on those things. And then vice versa, right? Is there something that AI is really good at doing that you just absolutely dread doing in the first place, like project management, for example? AI is excellent at it. And find new ways to collaborate with AI. I do think that's going to impact how we do think about workforce planning in the short term, even without waiting for the next 2 years. It's going to change a lot of the tasks that people are already doing. So at what point do you need fewer people? At what point do you need more tech and fewer people? I think it's a question that a lot of HR leaders are trying to figure out today, along with the board of directors and CEOs. We're investing in AI. It's costing us a lot of money, right? At what point does that augmentation, do we see that maybe not replacement, but at least augmentation to make an impact where we need to think about shifting people into different roles. So I think there's a lot of healthy anxiety there, and my encouragement is to be very hands-on. Like that's, if you're anxious and you take action, you probably will feel less anxious. So if you're worried about AI, try it. Try different models, get your hands dirty, and see what you like and start to collaborate with it more.
Thank you so much. I just want, before I take your concluding remarks, I want to do a shout out from one of our alumni, Shraddha Meshram, saying that big thank you for joining us, that she completed all of your LinkedIn
Oh,
courses, and she's thrilled to hear you speak at NYU. And you answered the question that Shraddha asked about AI and the impact of AI. But could you tell us, since we are all a learning community here, could you tell us, how do you recommend for us to navigate and stay current and continue to learn, both kind of on the changes in the external environment as well as technology-driven changes, and for us personally here at NYU, how do we prepare the next generation of specialists, leaders who are going to be working with people in organizations?
yeah. Oh gosh, that probably needs a whole nother hour. I'll give you some quick tips. I think especially for the next generation, spend time to get to know yourself. I think it's one of the most underrated skills is self-awareness. And maybe you had a lot of time to think during COVID like I did, but I got to know myself in ways that I haven't before. I hired a coach, I got a new therapist. I mean, I went all in on self-discovery. And that's actually how I decided to take the plunge and found my own company, because I realized public speaking and content creation bring me the most joy. And I want to make an impact beyond one company. That was very clear to me. And the only way to do that is through founding my own company and doing consulting work. So that's just a brief example of, discovering what you love and your why can go a long way. And know that it's going to change over time too. So definitely continue to know yourself. And then the other two I will share, one is definitely stay curious and devote time to learn. Devote time to learn, like it's on you, because it is. I carve out a lot of time on my calendar dedicated to learning new things, trying new AI models, and I encourage people to do the same. And that includes and it's not just time. I know like this may be unpopular, but you need to devote resources, financial resources as well. And if there's something that you want to learn, don't wait until your manager gives you money to take that course, right? Figure out a way. If it's really important to you, you will make it happen. And sometimes the learning departments in different companies may not be able to catch up to what every employee is learning. So you know, like set aside. I started this maybe 5 years ago. I set up a line on my budget for my own learning. So if there's something that my employer cannot cover, I'll just go. I'll take time off and I'll go take this course, I'll buy this book and what have you, signed up for the subscription. And it's paid off. It's definitely paid off for me. And then finally, I can't emphasize this enough. I know I'm a big fan of networking, both online and in person, for that human connection, for that social connection, because we are social beings and we need other people to thrive. And so, you know, whether it's you want to connect with me and continue to chat on LinkedIn, or when I'm back in New York one of these days, we can have, you know, in person 3D coffee. And again, that's all fantastic, but figure out what community you want to belong in, and think beyond your current school and think beyond your current workplace, because you probably, like me, have multiple interests, right? And for your additional interests, sometimes they actually come together nicely, like-minded, data and well-being. Who knew, right? And figure out those communities that you want to belong in, and make the time and effort to do that and network. And if you don't know how, ask Gen AI for help. Right? This is a bonus tip. You can ask Gen AI to help you write a cold email outreach to someone that you want to connect with, right? Someone you want to ask to do an informational interview, to have coffee with you, to have lunch with you, what have you. And I've been pleasantly surprised by what you gave back to me on those prompts, and definitely encourage you to prioritize networking in this very uncertain times.
Yes, thank you so much. That answers some of the questions that came through about how to stay in touch with you and follow you. And as I mentioned, LinkedIn is probably the best place. And Serena is very active on social media, and she's responsive. That much I can tell you to your questions and inquiries. But absolutely, I think the one lesson I've learned from you, it's not just absolutely measurement, it's the storytelling, etc., but it's practice, practice, practice. You have to practice what you preach. You invest in yourself, you maintain your well-being, and you learn skills, including technology and analytical skills that are going to help you move forward and be successful. So on this note, I want to thank Serena for your time. It's a very timely topic. Thank you very much. You know, these are the events that are coming up. We have several events in April, and obviously our signature conference, and I hope Serena will make it this time around, Coaching and Technology Summit, where we're exactly focusing on those tools that help you grow, individually grow in your personal and professional career and learning. So thank you all so much. Stay tuned. We are going to go back to our busy days and stay in touch with Serena. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you so much.